Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. And this video is to bring you a closer look at the Ives 7212 INT Intermediate Pivot. This would be the face presented to you if you had a left-hand door or a right-hand reverse door. Your perspective would be a right-hand reverse door. These two components are loose, and I'm going to take them. I'm just going to separate them now and show you them one at a time. So here is the frame portion, and we know that it's the frame portion because it has the spindle stud here, okay, where the weight of the door is being borne on. Okay, this is obviously an intermediate pivot. These are used like the middle hinges in a hanging of a door. Maximum load on this is 100 pounds. So you could call this a load-bearing hinge. Sometimes, well, these are always going to be used when you've got an offset, and it's a 3/4 offset installation. Let's clarify these terms as we go. The bottom line, the offset, what that means is, let's use the door portion. Here's the door leaf. What that means is, and again, this is a left hand. Okay, so this portion is going to swing towards you like this. Okay, and my door is coming this way. Try to use your imagination, I suppose, if you can. Comes out this way. Offset, this is a 3/4 offset, and what that means quite simply is the center line of this pivoting axis as measured from the face of the door is 3/4 inch. That's all that it means. Okay, 3/4 inch offset. So back to the frame portion. We know it's the frame portion because it's got the spindle stud. Okay. The door portion, we know it's the door portion because it has a packet bearing inside that there's ball bearings in there that make that spin, that cup or thimble looking item. And of course that bearing packet mates to the spindle stud like that. And it's the weight of the door that holds that all together. One thing to discuss now before I forget is there's a reference and there's a link below this video to the instructions and a cut sheet. The cut sheet shows everything dimensionally important about the hinge, so I won't beleaguer all the points there. The instructions are quite simple. You know, you'd think that there's going to be a lot of instructions regarding this, but they're just quite simple. Before we talk about installation, the bottom line is once you've got the door and frame machined, your critical point, you've got two critical things to contend with. As you're machining it, you've got to make sure that you have complete compatibility with the axis of pivoting, the imaginary line that goes down through the door. From your top pivot to your intermediate pivot or intermediate pivots, if you've got like an 8-foot door or taller, you would definitely need more than one of these. And your bottom pivot, you've got to make sure that that imaginary line is 3/4 inch from the face of the door to the center of that line, okay? And then, of course, measured correctly off the edge of the door, or however you'll do it, to confirm that you've got, you know, say you've dropped a plumb line, you know, to get yourself started. You've got to make sure that your top and bottom are installed correctly in terms of, you know, providing compatibility with the axis of pivoting. This now, okay, so that's the first important thing. The second important thing is that a nice feature of the Ives pivot is that the spindle stud can be adjusted vertically a little bit, actually a lot. Allen wrenches included. Loosen your set screw. Okay. You can then, you might need to use a wrench, rotate the spindle stud up. It looks like, I'm just going to guess that there's every bit of 3/8 of an inch, you know, adjustability on that. You can do it with an Allen wrench through access of the bottom hole as well. Okay, this was just machined so well that I could do that by hand. So the second point is that you want to make sure that your intermediate pivot is doing its job, meaning that you might have to adjust this up a little bit so that it completely makes contact with the packet, with the bearing packet inside. It needs to do its job of holding the door, of doing the lifting of the door. Not only that, but of course, keeping the door, like if it's a wood door, keeping it from warping. The middle hinge is going to, help keep the door straight, especially obviously on the pivot side of the door. So moving to the instructions, and I've machined for these hinges and I've installed them and serviced them, or these pivots, several times. Sure, they do look intimidating, but it's really not. The bottom line is this. When you start with one dimension, and this is page 2 of the instructions, when you start with one dimension, you're going to get the rest of them kind of automatically, step after step. If I was going to machine for this, you probably want to pause this video, pull that instruction up, and we'll go over it together. I would do the door portion, the 1/2 inch dimension here from the face of the door to that first hole, and then 5/16 of an inch from the top of the pivot to the center of that hole. I'm going to have my center point, and I'm going to have a reference to start from. It also calls out, I've got 3/4 inch from the center line of the pivot, axis of pivoting to the face of the door. It gives you your thickness of your leafs, gives you the reference point for the frame, 1/2 inch over and 5/16 down. Forgive me, as referenced to the door face. Your frame leaf won't be 3/4 inch from the face of the frame to the center of that, 1/2 inch from the face of the frame to the center of that hole. Your door is inset a little bit, 3/32 of an inch, something like that. So you'll have to compensate for that. A very important aspect is this final line in these instructions up here. Heel edge of door must be beveled 1/8 in 2. What that means is you can't use this on a square edge door. Your door must be beveled, okay? And you'll see that when you try to make that pivot, you can see that when it's in the closed position, those two pieces are not truly parallel. That's because the shoulder up here hits. Your door has to be beveled in order to use this. This is inherently made for a beveled edge door. And just a definition of terms right now, 1/8 in 2, jump ahead if you know what this means, 1/8 inch in 2 inch. This is what we're defining, 1/8 in 2. That means that for every this is your door showing it beveled. For every 2 inches of thickness, the distance will change, or the dimension will change from here to here would be 1/8 of an inch. What that equates to is a 3-degree bevel. Now, your door is probably not 2 inch, but that's just how this is defined. So an 1 3/4 door, you're going to have, approximately 16% less than 1/8 of an inch dimension. If you're ordering your door, order it beveled, tell them you want a 3-degree bevel. 1/8 in 2 inherently means 3-degree. If you're using a router, like a hand router. Okay, sorry, I had to take a phone call. So we were talking about the 1/8 inch in 2 dimension, 3-degree bevel. So if you're going to set a hand planer to do that, a power tool, not a old Stanley hand planer, you're going to want to have a tool to be able to tell you, an angle, where you can measure the dimension. It should be ever so slightly less than 1/8 of an inch, that sort of thing. But that bevel is very important, because if you get into a situation where your bevel is too shallow or too great, your hardware is just literally not meant to handle like a 4-degree bevel. So you'll want to make sure that you get that all completely correct. If you have any questions on 1/8 and 2, or how to determine that, reach out. But I think it's somewhat self-explanatory. So now that we're talking about, we talked about the important points of the pivot. We've talked about kind of the installation. Absolutely, these pivots are handed. So you've got to make sure that the handing you've got correct. The pivot that I'm showing to you here, like I said, is a left-hand pivot, or or a right-hand reverse as you're looking at it. Okay, or this way it would be a left-hand pivot if you were on the push side. This is the door. Okay, so that is definitely what you would consider the left hand. Okay, included with this is 6 machine screws, 1/4-20 machine screws, and they're assuming that this is going into a metal door, metal frame, aluminum door, aluminum frame, okay, or an aluminum or metal frame for sure. And then 3 wood screws, and that would be, of course, used in conjunction with, and that looks like might be a 14, a number 14 screw. It looks fairly large. That would be for your door leaf. You wouldn't really have a metal door hanging in a wood frame, but you'll get 3 of those screws. Shown in the US 2060 satin chrome finish. It's available in every common architectural finish by Ives. It's a good quality pivot. We sell a lot of Ives pivots. I like them a lot. I think they're priced very well. I think that they do the jobs very, very well. You'll see a lot of pivots. Ives pivots, I see a lot on aluminum entranceways in commercial or retail or non-private sort of entryways to buildings. The local village hall has a curtain wall of aluminum doors, and there's all Ives pivots installed there. And I think Ives is a real good product for this. And Ives, I don't know how old the company Ives is. It's decades, several decades old, and they're a full-line provider of not only commercial grade pivot hardware, but residential hardware like door stops and things of that nature. Reviewing the remainder of the instructions, the next thing I'd like to say is use a router if you're doing a wood door or an aluminum frame. Okay, if you're doing a steel door and frame, you're probably going to have ordered that from the factory already prepped. Okay, be very careful when you are measuring your center line. If you're going to be doing this in the field, keep in mind that the center line as you hook on the top of the door to where you mark it off on your door will be different than if you push your tape measure inside of the head of the frame and find a center line. You'll have to realize you've got a gap between the top of the door and the frame, so compensate for that. Typically 1/8 of an inch. So whatever you get on your frame inside of the header to the center line of your pivot, that center line would be most likely 1/8 of an inch less, but you'll want to confirm that. Nothing else really, calls my attention to really mention, other than it's a good quality piece of hardware. It has nice fit and finish. And it does include the Allen wrench and all those screws as we talked about earlier. If you have any questions on the Ives 7222 INT Intermediate Pivot or any other Ives product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.